This story is titled, Mom and Dad Took Money for My Treatment and Spent It on Golden Sice's engagement party. Now karma found them, and they're begging me for help. Hey Reddit, buckle up because this is going to be a long one. I've been sitting on this story for a while now, but after what went down last week, I need to get this off my chest. Fair warning, this isn't some feel-good family reconciliation story. This is about karma finally catching up to people who deserve it. I'm a 31-year-old male who has spent the last 15 years of my life working in construction. I started from the absolute bottom. We're talking pushing wheelbarrows full of concrete in 100 degrees heat, hauling lumber up 3 flights of stairs kind of bottom. Now I run my own crews as a site supervisor, but we'll get to that part later. First, you need to understand where I came from, because that's what makes all this so messed up. Growing up in our house was like living in some twisted parallel universe where I was basically a ghost, while my younger sister Lily was treated like she had discovered the cure for cancer. Every single thing she did was celebrated with excessive praise and attention, even if it was just learning a new dance move. I'm not even exaggerating here. Our house looked like some kind of Lily shrine. Every wall, every shelf, every flat surface had some trophy, certificate, or photo of her achievements. Ballet recitals, piano competitions, spelling bee participation awards. You name it, it was displayed like a precious artifact in a museum. Me? I had exactly one photo in the house. One. It was from my high school graduation, tucked away in some dusty album that probably hasn't seen daylight since Bush's second term. And it's not like I was some deadbeat kid. I lettered in football and wrestling, maintained a solid B+ average while working part-time, and never got in trouble with the law. But in my parents' eyes, that was just expected. No praise, no celebration, just a nod, and maybe a good job if they were feeling particularly generous that day. I started hitting the weights hard in sophomore year, partly because of football, but mostly because I needed somewhere to put all that anger. The gym became my sanctuary. While Lily was getting private piano lessons and dance tutorials, I was in our garage with a rusty bench press and some secondhand dumbbells I bought with my own money from mowing lawns. My dad never once spotted me or showed any interest in what I was doing. He was too busy videotaping Lily's dance performances or whatever else she was into at the time. You know what really gets me? I can count on one hand the number of times my parents showed up to my wrestling matches during 4 years of varsity competition. They always had some excuse. Lily had a recital. Lily had a competition. Lily needed help with her homework. I won the state championship in my weight class senior year, and neither of them was there. Why? Lily had an audition for some summer dance program. She ended up quitting after just 2 weeks anyway. By the time I hit 16, I was already working construction during summer breaks. Not because we had to. We weren't poor or anything. My dad had some cushy office job in logistics, and Mom worked part-time as a real estate agent. No, I worked because I wanted to be anywhere but home. The guys on the construction site became more of a family to me than my actual family. They taught me everything. How to read blueprints, how to operate machinery, how to tell when someone's trying to cut corners that could get people killed. Most importantly, they taught me what it means to have someone's back. I moved out the day after high school graduation, got a full-time position with the construction company I'd been working summers for, and rented a tiny studio apartment that barely fit a bed and a mini fridge. My parents barely noticed. They were too busy planning Lily's sweet 16 party, which by the way cost more than my first year's rent. The next few years, I busted my ass learning everything I could about construction. Started as a laborer, moved up to carpenter's assistant, then carpenter, then lead carpenter. By 25, I was running my own crew. The guys respected me because they knew I'd done every job I was asking them to do. I wasn't some college boy with a clipboard telling them how to work. I was right there in the trenches with them, getting just as dirty, lifting just as heavy. Meanwhile, Lily went off to some expensive private college, guess who paid for that, changed her major 3 times, and finally settled on communications or marketing or some other degree that seemed designed for people who couldn't decide what they actually wanted to do. Every time she came home, it was like the second coming of Christ. Mom would cook these elaborate meals, Dad would clear his schedule to spend quality time with her. Me? I got a text on my birthday if they remembered. But you know what? All that made me stronger. Every ignored achievement, every missed match, every time they chose her over me, it all just fueled the fire. I turned that anger into gains at the gym, into focus at work, into a drive to succeed despite them, not because of them. By the time everything went sideways with my health, I was benching 315 for reps, deadlifting 500, and running crews that finished projects ahead of schedule and under budget. So there I was at 28, crushing it at work, hitting new PRs at the gym every month, and finally feeling like I had my life together. I'd worked my way up to site supervisor at one of the biggest construction companies in the area, had my own apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. And was even thinking about maybe starting my own business down the line. Then life decided to remind me it's got a mean right hook. It started with this weird pain in my chest. Not like heartburn or muscle strain. This was different. At first, I brushed it off. You work construction long enough, random aches and pains become like background noise. Plus, I was that typical meathead who thought being tough meant ignoring when your body's trying to tell you something's wrong. Looking back, that was stupid. The real wake-up call came during a deadlift session. I was going for a new PR, 525 pounds. Everything felt solid during warm-ups, but as soon as I started pulling that weight, it felt like someone had wrapped a steel band around my chest and was tightening it with every breath. I had to bail on the lift. Me, the guy who once finished a wrestling match with a dislocated shoulder, had to drop the bar and sit down because I couldn't breathe. My buddy Todd from the crew, the same guy who taught me everything I know about concrete work, practically dragged my stubborn ass to the ER. I thought it was just going to be some pulled muscle or maybe a pinched nerve. Nope. After what felt like a million tests and scans, the doctor came in with that look on his face. You know, the one where they're trying to stay professional, but you can tell they're about to drop a bomb on you. Turns out I had this tumor pressing against my lung. Not the kind they can just cut out and be done with it either. We're talking major surgery followed by treatments that sounded like they came straight out of a sci-fi movie. The kind of situation that makes you realize all those hours in the gym, all that protein powder and creatine, don't mean jack when your own body decides to turn against you. But here's the real kicker: the cost. Remember how I mentioned I was doing well at work? Yeah, well, construction companies aren't exactly known for their amazing benefits packages. I had no health insurance, and being the young, invincible dumbass I was, I hadn't bothered getting private coverage. Why waste money on insurance when I could spend it on supplements and new lifting gear, right? God, I was so stupid. The numbers the hospital threw at me might as well have been in Monopoly money. Surgery alone was going to cost more than I made in 2 years. Then add in all the treatments, medications with names I couldn't even pronounce, follow-up care. We're talking enough money to buy a house in some states. And they wanted it up front, or at least proof I could pay. Welcome to American healthcare, right? I tried everything I could think of. First, I called every insurance company, but pre-existing conditions were still a major obstacle back then. I looked into medical trials, but none were accepting new patients. I even checked out those medical tourism websites about getting treatment in Mexico or Canada, but the doctor shut that down real quick. He said I needed to start treatment like yesterday. My crew, man, those guys were amazing. Todd started a GoFundMe right away. The other guys were offering to donate vacation days, sick leave, whatever they could. Even the old-timer who'd been busting my balls since day one about being too pretty for construction because I actually wore sunscreen, skin cancer's no joke, came by with an envelope full of cash he'd been saving for a new Harley. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. The numbers were just too big. We're talking 6 figures here, and time wasn't on my side. Every day I waited, this thing in my chest was growing, making it harder to breathe, harder to work, harder to even get through a normal day without feeling like I was drowning on dry land. I lost 15 pounds in the first month just from stress and not being able to eat right. I had to drop down to light duty at work because I couldn't handle the heavy lifting anymore. Every breath felt like I was trying to suck air through a coffee stirrer. Nights were the worst. Lying there in the dark, feeling this thing inside me, wondering if each breath might be the one where my lung finally gives out. That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. After years of being the independent one, the one who never needed help, the one who'd built everything from scratch, I had to swallow my pride and go ask my parents for help. They weren't rich, but they had savings, good credit, a paid-off house. Plus, they were my parents, the people who are supposed to have your back when shit hits the fan. It was a Tuesday evening when I drove to my parents' house. I remember that clearly because I'd just gotten my latest test results that morning, and the doctor was pushing hard for us to schedule the surgery ASAP. I'd lost another 10 pounds that month. My work jeans were hanging off me like I was some teenager trying to look cool. The chest pain was getting worse to the point where I had to take breaks walking up a single flight of stairs. Their house looked exactly the same as it always had. Real estate prices in their neighborhood had doubled since they bought the place. They were sitting on at least $500,000 in equity alone. I sat down in the chair across from them, trying to ignore how my chest felt like it was in a vice grip. I started explaining everything: the diagnosis, the timeline, the costs. I showed them all the paperwork from the hospital, the treatment plans, everything. I even had a letter from my doctor explaining how urgent this was. My hands were shaking the whole time, but not from the illness. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, asking them for help. You know what they did while I was laying all this out? Mom kept glancing at her phone, like she was waiting for a more important call. Dad just sat there with his arms crossed, that same look on his face he used to get when I'd tell him about my wrestling matches, like he was tolerating an annoying sales pitch. When I finally finished talking, there was this long silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl. Then Mom and Dad did this thing they always did, this little look between them, like they were having a whole conversation without words. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and dropped the bomb. "We can't help you with that, Jack. We've already committed our savings to Lily's wedding." I thought I'd misheard him at first. Like maybe the tumor had spread to my brain or something. But nope. He just sat there looking at me like he'd told me they couldn't lend me $20 for gas. The wedding? I remember my voice cracking. Not from emotion, but from straight-up disbelief. "You're choosing a party over my life." Mom jumped in then, all smooth and calm, like she was explaining something to a child. "It's not just a party, Jack. This is Lily's special day. We've already put down non-refundable deposits. The venue alone was $30,000. $30,000 for a venue. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there literally dying, needing surgery that could save my life, and they're worried about their precious Lily's Instagram-perfect wedding. I could die without this surgery," I said it slow, making sure they understood exactly what they were doing. This isn't me asking for help buying a car or starting a business. This is life or death. Dad actually had the balls to shrug, like he was dismissing a waiter who'd brought him the wrong appetizer. "You've always been resourceful, Jack. You'll figure something out. This is Lily's time. We can't let her down." That's when it hit me. All those years of being the forgotten son, all those missed events, all those times they chose her over me. It wasn't just them being busy or distracted. They genuinely valued her happiness over my life. Their son could literally die, and they were more concerned about their daughter having the perfect wedding photos. I got up to leave, my legs barely holding me up. Mom actually had the nerve to say, "Don't be dramatic, Jack. There must be some payment plan you can work out with the hospital." Payment plan. Like I was buying a dishwasher or something. The last thing I remember before walking out was looking at that wall of Lily's photos. All those smiling faces. All that money spent making sure their precious daughter had everything perfect. And there I was, their son, walking out of their house, knowing I meant less to them than a party. That was the last time I spoke to them for almost 5 years. The next few months after my parents chose a wedding over their son's life were pure hell. Not the metaphorical kind. I'm talking actual physical wondering if you'll wake up tomorrow kind of hell. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, you've got nothing left to lose. And sometimes that's exactly what you need to find out who you really are. The first thing I did after leaving their house was drive straight to work. It was already dark, but I knew Todd would still be there finishing paperwork. The guy's been running night crew for 15 years. I found him in the site office doing what he always does, cursing at Excel spreadsheets and drinking coffee that could strip paint. I told him everything. Not going to lie, I broke down halfway through. Here I am, 6, 2 inches, and 220 pounds. Well, more like 190 by then, crying like a baby in a construction trailer. Know what Todd did? Didn't say a word. Just got up, locked the office door, then he picked up his phone and started making calls. By midnight, we had a plan. Not a good one, but when you're drowning, you don't complain about the quality of the rope. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital payment negotiations, loan applications, and picking up every extra shift I could physically handle. The crew, my real family, stepped up in ways I still can't talk about without getting choked up. These guys, most of them living paycheck to paycheck themselves, somehow scraped together almost $15,000 for my treatment fund. Miguel, our master carpenter who'd been sending half his paycheck to family in Tijuana, handed me an envelope with $2,000 in cash. He said his kids could wait another year for their PlayStation. Big Pete, who everyone thought was just a stereotypical muscle-head concrete specialist, turned out to be a whiz at organizing fundraisers. The man got the local gym to host a bench press competition. convinced local businesses to donate prizes, and raised another $8,000 in one weekend. But it still wasn't enough. Not even close. The surgery alone was going to cost over $80,000, and that's before adding in all the other treatments. So I did what I had to do. I sold my truck, the one I'd spent 2 years restoring on weekends. I sold my custom gaming PC. I sold every piece of gym equipment I owned. I even sold my grandfather's watch, the only thing he'd ever left me. That one hurt the most. Meanwhile, I was still trying to work as much as possible, even though by this point I could barely make it through a 4-hour shift without feeling like I was drowning on dry land. The tumor was growing, pressing harder against my lung. Every breath felt like trying to inflate a balloon inside a box that's too small. I lost another 15 pounds. My work boots stopped fitting because my feet were swelling from the fluid retention. The worst part? Seeing Lily's wedding preparations all over social media. My parents were posting constant updates about venue tastings, flower arrangements, dress fittings. Each post was like a knife in the gut. The flower budget alone could have covered one of my chemotherapy sessions. The designer dress they bought her probably cost enough to pay for my first round of treatment. Then came the wedding invitations. Well, not to me, obviously. I heard about them from a cousin who still talked to me. Apparently, they were these elaborate things with gold foil and custom calligraphy, costing like $15 per piece. They ordered 200 of them. Do the math on that one. $3,000 on paper that most people would throw away, while their son was working security shifts at a warehouse between his regular job, barely able to breathe. But here's where the story takes a turn you might not expect. Remember that GoFundMe that Todd started? It caught the attention of one of our suppliers, a big commercial construction materials company. Their CEO had lost his brother to the same type of cancer I had. The guy calls me personally one morning and says he wants to help. Next thing I know, they're offering to cover 40% of my medical costs through their corporate charitable foundation. That was the break I needed. Between that, the loans I'd taken out, everything I'd sold, and what the crew had raised, I finally had enough to schedule the surgery. I had to drain my 401k, max out 3 credit cards, and sign up for a payment plan that would take years to pay off. But I was going to live. The surgery was scheduled for 3 days before Lily's wedding. Not that they knew or cared. They were too busy with final dress fittings and rehearsal dinners. I went into that operating room alone. Well, not really alone. Todd took the day off to drive me there. Miguel's wife made me a care package of homemade tamales for after the surgery. Big Pete organized the crew to cover all my shifts for the next month. You want to know true family? It's not the people who share your DNA. It's the guys who work overtime so you can make rent while you're recovering. It's the rough-handed carpenter who sits in a hospital waiting room for 12 hours straight just so you don't wake up alone. It's the crew that passes around a hard hat collecting dollars and quarters because every bit helps. I made it through the surgery. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital, another month recovering at home. The crew took turns checking on me, bringing food, helping with basic stuff I couldn't do while I was healing. Not once did my phone ring with a call from my parents or Lily. They were probably too busy posting wedding photos on Instagram. Recovery was a bitch. Anyone who's been through major surgery knows what I'm talking about. That feeling where even breathing feels like you're learning a new skill. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. Once you start climbing back up, you realize just how strong you really are. And man, did I climb. The first few months were rough. I lost most of my muscle mass. Couldn't lift more than a gallon of milk without feeling like my chest was going to explode. But you know what? Every morning I woke up breathing was a middle finger to the people who'd left me for dead. I started small, walking to the mailbox, then around the block, then actual cardio. I rebuilt myself one painful step at a time. Todd and the crew kept me on light duty, mostly supervising and doing paperwork. It wasn't much, but it kept me in the game. I started learning the business side of construction. Contracts, bidding, project management. Turns out when you can't lift heavy anymore, your brain starts working overtime. Who knew? About a year after the surgery, I got an unexpected call from that CEO who'd helped with my medical bills. The guy wanted to meet for coffee. I figured he was just checking up on his investment, making sure I hadn't died or whatever. Nope. Turns out he'd been watching how I handled everything. The recovery, the work, the crew management. He offered me a position as a project manager for their commercial division. Better pay, full benefits finally, and most importantly, a chance to learn how the big boys play. I took that opportunity and ran with it like I was being chased. I spent the next few years absorbing everything I could about commercial construction. Nights, Weekends. It didn't matter. While Lily was posting about her perfect suburban life and my parents were bragging about their country club membership, I was building something real. I started small at first, taking on some of the smaller projects nobody else wanted. You know, the ones where the margins are tight and you've got to get creative. I learned every trick in the book about maximizing efficiency without cutting corners. My crews loved me because I'd actually been in their boots. I knew what it was like to bust your ass in 100 degrees heat for minimum wage. By year 3, I was handling multi-million-dollar projects. Remember that tumor that nearly killed me? I used that experience to specialize in medical facility construction. Turns out hospitals love working with someone who understands their world from both sides. I started making connections, building relationships. The kind of networking you can't fake because it comes from shared experience. Then I got the project that changed everything. A $50 million medical center renovation. It was the biggest job I'd ever managed. I spent 6 months planning it down to the smallest detail. The project was a massive success. Came in under budget and ahead of schedule. It got written up in some industry magazines, won a few awards. Suddenly, I wasn't just some construction guy anymore. I was an innovative voice in medical facility design, or some fancy title like that. I started getting calls from other healthcare systems wanting to work with us. Meanwhile, life at home got better too. I met Natalie at a supplier conference. She runs a commercial electrical contracting company. She was the first woman I'd ever met who could talk about load-bearing calculations and still make me laugh so hard my chest hurt. In a good way this time. We got married last year. Small ceremony, just close friends and my real family. The crew. Everything was going great. Then, about 6 months ago, I started hearing rumors through the industry grapevine. Remember that fancy country club my parents were so proud of belonging to? Turns out Dad had gotten involved in some real estate investment scheme with some other members. You know the type, promising huge returns, minimal risk, all that bullshit. Only this time, it wasn't just their membership dues they'd invested. They'd mortgaged their house, cashed out their retirement accounts, the whole 9 yards. The first sign something was wrong came when they suddenly started selling off their toys. Dad's precious golf club membership? Gone. Mom's brand new luxury SUV? Traded in for a used Honda. Their regular spots at all the charity galas and social events? Mysteriously empty. But the real shit didn't hit the fan until last month. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it. I was in the middle of reviewing bids for a new project. I wish I'd let it go to voicemail. It was my mother's voice, sounding small and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "Jack, we need to talk. It's important." That phone call from my mother? Turns out their small financial trouble was more like the Titanic after meeting that iceberg. The investment scheme Dad got involved with wasn't just bad. It was catastrophically criminally bad. Like FBI investigating the whole thing bad. They'd sunk everything they had into it. Their retirement savings, their home equity, even took out additional loans using their house as collateral. All gone. But here's where it gets interesting. Their first move wasn't to call their precious Lily, their golden child, their perfect daughter, the one they'd chosen over my literal survival. Nope, they called me the forgotten son, the one they'd left to rot when he needed them most. Because Lily? She'd already turned them down. Hard. See, about a week before they called me, they'd shown up at Lily's McMansion in her fancy gated community. The same house they'd helped her and her lawyer husband buy with a massive down payment while I was still paying off my medical bills, by the way. They'd packed up some suitcases, thinking they could just move in with their precious daughter until things sorted themselves out. Want to know what their perfect princess did? Had her husband answer the door. This guy, this corporate lawyer who'd spent the last 5 years kissing their asses at every family gathering, looks them dead in the eye and says, "We can't risk having your financial problems affect our children's future." Then he hands them a business card for a bankruptcy attorney and closes the door in their faces while Lily watched from the window. The same daughter they'd spent hundreds of thousands on, private school, dance lessons, college, that ridiculous wedding, wouldn't even let them sleep on her couch. The same parents who'd chosen her wedding over their son's life were now standing on her doorstep with nowhere to go, and she treated them like door-to-door salesmen. Mom told me all this through tears when she finally broke down and called me. Not because she felt bad about what they'd done to me, no, she was just desperate. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. Dad's precious Mercedes had already been repossessed. All their friends from the country club had suddenly stopped returning their calls. We don't know what to do, Jack, she sobbed into the phone. We've tried everything. We need help. I sat there in my office, my nice big corner office with a view of the city, listening to her cry. The same woman who'd sat there stone-faced when I told her I might die without surgery was now breaking down because they might lose their house. How much do you need? I asked, keeping my voice neutral, professional, like I was talking to a subcontractor who'd screwed up a bid. $50,000, she whispered. Just to catch up on the mortgage and hold off the foreclosure. We can figure out the rest later. $50,000. The exact amount they'd spent on Lily's wedding photographer and videographer. I remember seeing the photos. They'd hired some famous Instagram guy who usually did celebrity weddings. Got a whole team of videographers too, with drones and everything. Real artistic. What does Lily say about all this? I asked, even though I already knew. There was a long pause. She says they're investing in their children's future, Mom finally said. That they can't risk their financial stability. But Jack, we're your parents. We raised you. I cut her off. Like you raised me when I needed surgery? When I was literally fighting for my life? That was different, she snapped, sudden anger replacing the tears. That was an emergency. We had commitments. An emergency? I felt my voice rising. I could have died, Mom. Actually died. But you had commitments to Lily's wedding. And now you're calling me because she won't help you? That's when Dad got on the phone, still trying to sound authoritative like he had any power left in this situation. Now listen here, son. What's past is past. We need to think about the future. About family. Family. There was that word again. The same one they'd thrown around when they needed something, but conveniently forgot when I was the one in need. Tell me something, Dad, I said, leaning back in my chair. When Lily turned you away, when her husband handed you that bankruptcy attorney's card, did it hurt? Did it feel like someone had ripped your heart out? Like the person you'd given everything to just didn't care if you lived or died? The silence on the other end was deafening. The morning after that phone call from my parents, I had a lot to think about. I spent a few hours in my home gym, the one Natalie and I had built in our basement. I wasn't really working out, just sitting there on my bench press, staring at myself in the mirror, looking at the scar on my chest from the surgery I'd had to fight for alone. The next day, I got a call from the bank handling my parents' mortgage. Turns out I was still listed as the emergency contact. Lily had demanded to be removed from all their financial documents months ago. The bank representative was very professional, explaining they were preparing for foreclosure proceedings, asking if I was in a position to help resolve the situation. I told them I'd get back to them. I had some thinking to do first. That Saturday, I drove down to my old construction site, the one where I'd started as a laborer, where Todd and the crew had saved my life. The place was different now. We were finishing up that $50 million medical center project, my project. Standing there in the morning sun, looking at this massive building that existed because I'd survived, I made my decision. I called my parents and told them to meet me at the site. I told them to come at 7 a.m. sharp when the day crew would be arriving. They showed up looking like hell. "Why are we here, Jack?" Mom asked, trying to sound authoritative, but her voice was shaking. They looked out of place in their casual luxury clothes, surrounded by men and women in work gear who were actually producing something real. I turned to face them. "See this building? This whole medical center? It exists because I survived. Not because of you. In spite of you. Every person who gets treatment here, every life that gets saved in this building, it's because I made it without you." Dad started to say something, but I cut him off. "I brought you here because I want you to understand something. 5 years ago, I sat in your living room and begged for help. I needed $80,000 for surgery that would save my life. You chose Lily's wedding instead. A party that cost more than what I needed to survive. We've apologized for that," Mom interrupted, her voice small. "We were wrong. We know that now." "No," I said, my voice hard. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you need something from me now. There's a difference." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. "You need $50,000 to save your house. That's less than what you spent on Lily's wedding flowers. The daughter who won't even let you sleep on her couch now. Are you going to help us or not?" Dad demanded, a flash of his old arrogance showing through. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I turned to the crew, my real family. "Hey, Todd, remember when I needed surgery? When everyone here pitched in to help save my life?" Todd walked over, wiping his hands on his vest. "Sure do, boss. Still got the hard hat we used to collect donations." I turned back to my parents. These men who make a fraction of what you used to make, who have their own families to support, gave everything they could to help me live. They showed me what real family means. Then I did something that felt like lifting a 1,000-pound PR off my chest. I smiled. The answer is no. I'm not giving you a cent. Not for the house, not for anything. Ever. Mom started crying. Dad's face went red. We're your parents! You can't just… I can. I cut him off. And I am. You know what the difference is between you and Lily? Nothing. You're exactly the same. You only care about people when they're useful to you. The moment they need something, you throw them away. I gestured to the medical center rising behind me. I built something real here. Something that helps people. While you were throwing parties and playing golf, I was creating something that matters. And I did it without you. Where are we supposed to go? Mom sobbed. We'll be homeless. I shrugged. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful. Isn't that what you told me when I was dying? I started walking away then, but turned back one last time. Oh, and Dad? Remember what you said about family helping family? You were right. Family does help family. You're just not my family anymore. Family. I left them standing there in the dust of my construction site, surrounded by the men and women who'd shown me what real family means. I went up to my office and watched through the window as they got in their beat-up Honda and drove away. That was 2 months ago. They lost the house last week. Lily's still not taking their calls. Last I heard, they're living in some extended stay motel, trying to figure out what to do next. Their country club friends have all disappeared. Their golden child wants nothing to do with them. And me? I just signed a contract for another medical center project, bigger than the last one. The crew's still with me, every single one of them. Natalie's pregnant with our first kid. Life's good. Sometimes karma takes her time. But when she finally shows up, she makes sure to finish the job right. And for those asking, no, I don't regret my decision. Some bridges need to stay burned.